We're Ace Comicals. My name's Greg, and today I'm joined by my co-host Rahul. Let's get started. Hi guys, welcome to a super edition of Ace Comicals. This is episode 11, and today we have Rahul and not Leon, so we've swapped them.
He abandoned us. How dare he take a holiday? Like I can't believe he'd miss a recording. That's so selfish of him.
He's abandoned us for Disneyland. He's not abandoned us. He deserves a break, bless him.
He definitely deserves a break. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, no secret identities here, just two of the usual suspects today, myself and Rahul. So we're here to talk about the wonderfully uplifting Superman Secret Identity, which is Kurt Busiek and Stuart Immonen. Sorry if I've got your names wrong. If you do happen to listen to this, I apologise profusely. We're good at butchering names. It's become a tradition now on Ace Comicals. It's a 4-issue miniseries each consisting of 48 pages, and it ran monthly from January 2004, and I think it's rather good. So what it actually is, because it's not a Superman story per se, it's a minimalist what-if tale of a boy called Clark Kent discovering that he has powers similar to those of his namesake. So it's like a non-canonical Superman story. It's not set in the actual DC universe, it's set in the real world. So it's set on real Earth with real Earth cities like New York, Kansas, etc., rather than Metropolis, Gotham. And it's a world where superheroes only exist in comic books, at least for the beginning, for the most part. Occasionally, I guess it gets labelled as an Elseworld title, but I don't think it is actually. Sometimes it gets counted an Elseworld title, sometimes it doesn't. It's a weird one. It's kind of taking the idea of Superboy Prime and playing it ever so slightly differently. So after the Crisis on Infinite Earth stuff, and you had which is like DC's big massive crossover in the 80s, and then after that I think you got Superboy Prime, and this is kind of like a riff on the idea behind Superboy Prime.
Just to interrupt, Greg, as someone who's never really been into the DC universe as a whole, I've only ever really read Batman graphic novels. What differentiates this from an Elseworld comic? What's an Elseworld comic? Well,
I guess it doesn't differentiate from an Elseworld comic much, because the Elseworld stuff is like it's what they labelled their kind of what ifs. So what if Batman was actually a monster bat thing, or what if Batman was a vampire, or what if, it's these different riffs on the same story, how things would play out differently.
Right. Okay. So
it's because it doesn't fit into canon, and it's different. It doesn't fit into canon and it's different. So it's a what if. And what if Superman was in the real world?
I see. No, I just thought it had a different connotation, but it is. It's
literally just kind of, yeah. It's yeah. I guess that's the easiest way to describe it. But Elseworld has its own thing as well. Like true Elseworld titles fit into their own thing.
Oh, okay. So there's an Elseworld canon as well.
Yes and no.
But regardless, the story Secret Identity doesn't really fit into it. It is basically a standalone story.
All you need to know is it's confusing alphabet spaghetti, and this sits outside of all of it. So,
I mean, as someone, like I said, I've never read any of the other stuff. I thought this was great on its own in isolation, knowing the bare bones of the Superman mythos.
Well, yeah, that's what it is. It's on its own in isolation, and it's a great story for that. It'd probably be a good story to use to introduce people to superheroes, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a good recommendation for someone who's never read anything, because everybody knows who Superman is. But
anyone who's never read Superman, I guess, before, you could start with this, because this kind of introduces it all. And yeah, so it's this young boy is born into a family with the surname Kent. This is how the story starts. And his dad thinks it'd be funny to call him Clark, because obviously, there's all these comic books around and these cartoon shows and these movies where there's this guy called Clark Kent who's mild-mannered and is actually a superhero with superpowers, and it's the kind of, his dad just thought it'd be cool and he thought the son might like it. And
it's such a dad joke.
It's a dad thing. It's the kind of thing. It's the kind of thing a dad would do, I guess.
Not quite thinking through how that would affect the child.
yeah. Something to go down the bar and talk to his friends about. Dude, I called my son Clark. It's so good. And his wife thinks
surprisingly on board with it. Right?
Yeah, she's on board. Yeah, she's totally on board with it. Because she thinks it's cute because there's all these toys and books and things that she can buy that are about her son. And it's about him growing up. And obviously, he doesn't really enjoy it. He finds it quite tiresome, actually. Because it's like every day of his life he's getting this Clark Kent stuff. Until eventually he finds out he actually has Superman's powers. And then from there, the 4 issues kind of chart his life, dealing with these powers, how they affect his relationships, how they affect friendships, and what he chooses to do with these powers and how he keeps that secret. The crux of it all is his secret identity, which is the name of the title. So, first impressions. For me, it feels uneventful, but it's uneventful in a nice way. It's calm. It's something that it's relaxing to read, I find, which I really liked about it, as far as the writing goes, because there's not too much peril there. It's not something that sometimes when you read something and you get like a ball of stress because you're like, what's going to happen on the next page? It's got
It feels a little less comic book bombastic-y than it does literary. And I think uneventful might not be quite the right word, because that makes it sound like it might be a little bit dull. I think it's more that it doesn't focus on the action.
Yes. I didn't mean dull.
Uneventful in a nice way.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I meant, yeah. And it's fairly minimalist. It's a fairly simple story. There's not a lot going on in the periphery. It focuses on this one man and this one boy and how he deals with having superpowers and what he chooses to do with those powers. And as well as challenging the idea of superheroes and what we believe a superhero should be in places like how a superhero should behave, I guess, outside of a comic book, if that makes sense to you, Ray. Do you get me on board with that?
It's not quite a deconstruction, if anything, because around this time we had, or in the past we've had, deconstructions of the comic book heroes, like especially the big, like the tentpole heroes like Superman. They've been torn down and torn apart and deconstructed, and I think this is almost kind of a reconstruction of him and trying to find the best parts of Superman through the lens of slight reality, I guess. Yeah, and it reconstructs it in a way that shows the heroism again. It's not all like dour and depressing like some of the first deconstructions of heroes, where it's not like Watchmen or like a one of those tearing apart Batman philosophy.
See, this is why you're good on this podcast. You use your words better than I do, and you can say things that I want to say, but I get all knotted up.
Here's my secret, Greg. I've written it all down. I'm reading it from a page right now.
If I tried to write it down, it'd come out the same way on paper. That's the problem. I try to make notes and I can't do it. And the fact that it's so relaxing to read and so calming, and the fact that it is so nice for me to read. It's like this meditation on Superman and this through the lens of reality, and the way that Superman would work in the real world, the way that his powers would work and things like that. I just it was a breath of fresh air, actually, when I read it, because this is the first time I've ever read it, actually, for this podcast. I'd never read it previously. My history with Superman is largely through the lens of Batman stories and Justice League stories. I I'm not somebody that's read a lot of solo Superman. So this was nice, and I couldn't help but think, like, when I was if I was a teenager when I read this, if I was younger if I read this when it came out in 2004, I would have loved it more than I love it now. I mean, I love it now, but I would have loved it more back then, because I think back then it would have really resonated with me. This kid, you know, discovering he's got powers and being quite a solitary character. I quite would have, there's notes this book hits that teenage Greg would have loved.
I think I would feel the opposite. I think teenage Rahul wouldn't have liked this as much as I do now. Like, I think I've picked it up at the exact right time in my life, where I think, like, we all, people our age and the things that are happening right now, we kind of want something hopeful that looks towards the future in a really positive way. And that's what I got from this. I think as a teenager, when I was a little bit emo, you know, I think I would have gone more for the Batman stuff, the kind of like dark, gritty, brooding hero. And this doesn't really satisfy that, but it does have a really nice, positive, hopeful, forward-thinking, progressive message, which I really like now. Definitely.
I know. That's what I really like about it now. I like this hopefulness, especially in the times we're in, unfortunately. And I like when I was a teenager, I used to like hopeful stories. I mean, yeah, I used to read a lot of Batman, and I used to read a lot of everything else, but the stories that I used to like the most were the ones that had hope and good things happening to good people and good ultimately triumphing.
What happened to us? Proper flip-flop, didn't we?
Yeah. Well, I still can't watch Game of Thrones for that very reason, because bad things happen to good people, and it just really irritates me. That's literally it. I'm so simple and easily boiled down that way. But yeah, as a teenager, I would have loved this, and I still love it now for the same reasons, I think. And I mean, I've probably been guilty in the past of saying that I think Superman is plain.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was going to go on to
but
say. I
don't think this is a plain book. I know that this is the same with you as well. I know that you were gonna.
Yeah, like I generally don't enjoy Superman stories. I think, like you said, I've only ever come to Superman through Batman, or basically Batman stories, because I've never really got into the Justice League either, or Teen Titans or anything. But I have seen all the movies, and I think, especially recently, I found all of the Superman films to be really dull. And I think most people would agree with that. And that's kind of put me off from reading Superman stories in general, just because the characters never really resonated with me since I was a kid, when it was the... oh, God, you're going to hit me. What was the original actors, the original Superman? What was his name?
You know what? It's on the tip of my tongue.
This is terrible.
Yeah.
We're going to run a comic book podcast. Let me just... Because I know who the director was. It was Richard Donner, wasn't it? But let me just get that.
The original Superman actor. The name is on the tip of my tongue. I can see his face in my head. I've just drawn a total blank.
Reeve.
That's him. That's him.
Christopher Reeve is how I think of Superman, and those stories when I was a kid really hit me, and since then they've never really quite hit the mark again. So I kind of find Superman a tad boring, or I think I'm going to find him a bit boring. But then I've also never given many Superman comics much of a chance. So when Leon recommended this one, Secret Identity, I was kind of hesitant, but I trusted that he knows both of our tastes quite well, and I went into it with quite open eyes, I think. And I have to say, I love this book. Like, I really enjoyed it. Like I said before, it really ticked a lot of the boxes for me, who I am now, and like enjoying hopeful, forward, progressive stories. And I think it's an attempt at a grounded Superman tale without being dark and gritty.
Yeah.
And it so easily could have been a dark and gritty tale. I think they've written it deliberately to be an antithesis to dark and gritty 90s deconstructive comic books.
100%.
And yeah, it could so easily have been dour and pessimistic. And it's also it's a really generous tale. like there's a lot to get from it, I think, because I feel slightly different to you about this. You called it minimalist and a fairly simple story, which I think I'd agree with. Like the plotting is quite simple. It's just him at various stages, important stages of his life, and how he's dealing, how those moments of his life, which we can all relate to, you know, growing up, moving out, finding love, how the powers that he has colors and affects those moments in his life. But then I also got a really different interpretation of the story on a second read, but I think I'd like to talk about that more in spoilers. So,
yeah.
Before we do that then, should we talk about the art style? I think you're better at describing these things than I am.
I was going to add to some of your points that you just mentioned. Like, as far as Superman went when I was a kid, I wasn't actually... The Christopher Reeve movies, I wasn't really a fan of those films as a kid. I mean, I watched them, but they were just there. They weren't something that I was overly in love with. They weren't something that they weren't something that I didn't like. They were just there. I didn't... They were just sort of flatline for me. And I think I started to enjoy Superman more when viewed through the lens of a Batman story or through Batman, because for me it felt like Superman was it's like a parody of Batman, almost like the perfect version of Batman.
Yeah, the other side of the coin.
Yeah,
of that type of hero.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They play off each other quite well, which is why I enjoy Superman in Batman stories, but not really in isolation.
Because on his own, I think when I was a kid, he's just too. There's nothing. He's got no real weakness apart from kryptonite, which is, you know, it's not easy to get hold of. He always wins. And sometimes it's nice to see... I mean, yes, I've said that I used to like it when good things happen to good people and good guys win. I used to like seeing the good guys ultimately triumph. But I didn't... It didn't feel like there was any... You got the good guy triumphing without any of the... It didn't feel like you earned it.
Yeah, I think Kryptonite when you read his powers and his weaknesses always felt a bit ham-fisted to me.
When you read the book, a Superman book, you get to the end of it, and it doesn't feel like you've earned that good ending. If you understand where I'm coming from, or if you watch
again, I've never really read enough to know whether that's actually true or not. I think I'm going to have to give Superman stories a bit more of a chance.
That was just me when I was a kid, not to bag on Superman, but that was what I felt like as a kid. But now I'm starting to see a different side of it, and when you read Superman tales now. Certain Superman stories have really interesting insight into the way this character is used, and the way they can use this character to highlight different things and different to highlight the state of superhero fiction at that point in time when that book was written, for example. It's the way they use the character like that is it's really good, actually, and that's what I get from Superman stories now, and I'm starting to realise that, you know what, maybe you do earn that good ending when you read those books. But yeah, so the artwork in this book, I really, really like it. It's like this flat shaded retro advertising style, like an old you like old posters for general stuff, I guess, from the 1950s and things, you know, like old posters advertising maybe a cleaning product or a foodstuff or something like that, and you've got like this flat shaded picture of a family enjoying themselves.
Yeah, like post-war advertising.
Yeah, it's got that kind of edge to it. It's this really, it's quite pulpy as well, I think, in places.
Yeah, pulpy and kind of soft and like a little bit muted, not quite pastel-y, but muted, flat colours.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed this, but the red and blue, that seems to pop up an awful lot.
No, actually, I'm going to have to
if you look back,
go and try and pay attention to that. What kind of things stood out to you?
I don't know if it's just me, but there's like I'm looking at some of the pages now. You've got muted blue tones and muted red tones. Like, it's warm and cold in the same panel. It's like, but they do, and if you look at the pages, like some of the pages, like where it's cold, where there's the shadow, maybe where it's blue, and where it's warm, it's red, or it's got red in it somewhere. So
that's one thing I was going to say about the coloring in this book is it's really intense. Like it goes through phases. I think like one thing I noticed skipping through the book right now is it starts off really muted and kind of dull at the start, and then pops into color once he finds his powers and and starts enjoying himself a little bit. And there's a scene where he goes to a carnival, and that's really vibrant and bright. And I think that's because he's at his he's getting the most enjoyment out of it, and these kind of things work really well.
But everything is Superman coloured, like it's red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, blue. If you look back at some of the panels, there's a lot of red, yellow, blue framing in each one. It's like the main colours used are Superman, and I like that. I like it's nice. It ties it all together nicely, and it's just one of these things that I noticed that I picked up on this red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, and I think even like there's splashes of green with his antagonist slightly. I think I might have to give it another read and try and pay attention to the colours a bit more.
Where people are antagonising him, it's a little bit green, which kryptonite. But you've got green kryptonite because there's several colours of kryptonite. But let's not get into that. But you've got as well these pages that begin each issue where it's it's classic Superman artwork. So Silver Age, Golden Age Superman artwork, or Golden Age, Silver Age style artwork.
And I love that, like each of the 4 issues starts with like a whole page of this Silver Golden Age Superman, but it's always in the context of somebody in his world giving him a gift. Is of Superman. So somebody's bought him a Superman gift thinking that he'll like it. So I think issue 1 is his uncle's bought him a Superman comic. In that Golden Age style. And that's the first thing we see. And I think later on, he receives a birthday card that's got the Super Family on it, and the quote unquote camera pulls back to reveal him reading that card and stuff. I think that's a really clever way to tie the old Superman and this story together. And
the last one's like a holiday decoration, but that one is Bruce Timm style. So that one,
right.
That one,
Bruce Timm being
the TAS guy, the guy who did the when you were a kid, if you ever watched a DC superhero cartoon, so TAS even, sorry, the actual Superman cartoon, and we had the Justice League cartoon as well.
And just for the uninitiated, TAS means the Batman, the animated
Batman,
series.
Yes, Batman. We always call it TAS, so I should probably start using its real name because I'm recording a podcast and I'm not just talking to my friends. But no, it's Batman, the animated series, the really good one with the Danny Elfman music and the Bruce Timm artwork.
Brilliant one. The one that when anyone ever brings up like the best Batman intro, they'll bring up Batman TAS.
Whenever anyone talks about Batman, it's about Batman TAS.
Or like the best Joker performance.
Yes,
bring up Batman.
Yes.
Because let's not get into Batman TAS. We could record a whole... And Leon would kill us if we started talking about TAS without him. So
Leon's like tearing his hair out right now, listening to this, thinking, that he wanted to be part of this conversation.
He's listening to this in Disneyland and he punches Mickey Mouse in the
face. Just making him jealous.
Punches him right in the nose and he goes, ah. Anyway,
so it's just for reference, by the way, the best Joker performance that we're talking about is Mark Hamill, but that's enough for that. We'll end it there. It's Bruce Timm, and I like Bruce Timm. He's one of my favourite artists actually for DC stuff. I like his work on Batman, obviously, and I like his style, his sort of. What do you call it? Like 1930s architecture.
Yeah, I'd kind of call it like it's flat and bold and kind of reminds me of like propaganda, super like Ubermensch art. So the kind of things.
I've got it. Art Deco.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it from the context of things that have tried to ape it. So things like The Incredibles uses that a lot, or BioShock uses that kind of art style a lot.
Yeah. The Incredibles uses it with the big broad shoulders and the tiny little legs, the triangle-shaped men.
Yeah,
but yeah,
and literally the Superman in the way that before the comic book character was created, like the Ubermensch, the ideal human, that kind of
but it's done kind of it's done with very simple, very geometric shapes, and it's got like, for me, it's got like this air of Art Deco about it, which I really like. But yeah, as we move through the book, the art style it's got a real note of realism about it as well, which I really like, because that keeps it grounded, because you're looking at something that's set in the real world, and it helps you remember that by not being too graphic, by being more fine art, more refined, I guess. And
then very occasionally we get these like really big bold splashes of like hyperactive violent color.
Yes.
Like when he's actually using his powers, or when he's angry in certain parts of this story, you get to see this like overblown, like in your face color, which contrasts the rest of the kind of grounded, realistic art style.
Color intensifies.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. I'm just going back through some of the pages now, actually. There's the last 4 pages of the last book, but I don't know if I want to talk about that yet, or save that.
Yeah, we'll get to that in spoilers.
Yeah, we'll come to that in spoilers. So, I guess, have we got anything left to say about the artwork?
Well, we haven't talked about the writing yet, because I think the artwork we've covered, the pulpy magazine style, it's very Americana style. It reminds me of, like, I've just finished reading It as well, and it really I think the art style goes really well with like the 1950s to the 1980s era of It, and it kind of reminds me of the same thing.
Yes.
But the writing has a really interesting narrative framing device. It's Clark himself reading out his memoirs. Is that right?
Yeah, the narration is he's not reading it, he's typing it.
See, this is one of the things I didn't quite understand. And again, maybe this is spoiler talk, but it's maybe one of the very few nitpicks I have of this story, that I don't really understand the context of what he's writing, because sometimes the tense of his diary changes. So sometimes he's talking about something that's happening in the moment as we're seeing it, but then in the next page he might be talking about it as though he's reading it out or typing it out 20 years later. Did you find that confusing, or is that just me reading too much into it, or reading it incorrectly?
I don't know about typing it 20 years later. I think it's like, it feels to me like it's something that he sat down to do once every couple of weeks, or where it's like his release, because he can't really tell anybody.
Because that's one of the things we didn't bring up, is that one of the big differences between this story and traditional Superman stories is that he tries really hard to hide his identity, not just his identity as Superman separate from Clark Kent, but the existence of Superman at all. He tries to keep that a secret, and he tries really hard to make sure that the real world doesn't truly see much of Superman.
Yes.
Which is an interesting spin on this, because we always see him trying really hard to keep the two identities of his real life persona and his Superman persona separate, but never actually trying to hide who Superman is from the public.
But you get the writing is the story device is that his release, his way of getting all of this out of his head, is to get his thoughts down via an old typewriter, and it starts when he's a kid, and the narration through the whole book is him typing away. It's his memoirs, basically, that he's typed up. Basically, it's just something that he just does as a release. It's like a diary for him that he's been keeping for years, since he was a child, kind of thing.
Yeah, because who else can he tell his secrets to?
Yeah, exactly.
He hasn't trusted anyone to reveal his secrets.
And it's something that he's been doing since before he had powers.
That's true. Yeah.
Yep. As a way of dealing with the Clark Kent jibes. But it's something that we're going to have to move on to in spoilers, because it's all very knitted together with the plot.
Yeah. So let's get into spoilers. Unless have you got anything else to add to
No, I'm good. I think I've said everything. Everything I can say. I think I've totally exhausted my vocabulary as far as the artwork goes.
Okay, cool. So, so let's like put a line in the sand now and say we're moving into spoilers.
Put a line under that and just we'll move on to spoilers now. So this is going to be the spoiler section. So if you plan on reading this book, which we hope you do, this is where you should stop the podcast and then come back to us later once you've read the book. And
which we would, I know for a fact, I would definitely recommend this. I think, I think Leon knew exactly what he was doing when he recommended this to both of us.
Yeah.
Because even when I told him afterwards, after I'd finished reading it for the first time, and I sent you guys a text saying I love this Superman story, I didn't expect to, and he did a smug face emoticon. I can
imagine his smug face in real life, just slowly nodding his head, just like yes, I have done good, and he has done good. You've done good, Leon. This was a great recommendation, and it's something that everybody should read. I think because it's a nice story. It's not. It's just a nice story. It's the best way to put it.
I think we've gone over how much we appreciate the tone of this thing enough right now. Yeah. So spoilers. Your first spoiler, Greg. What do you want to say about it?
My first spoiler. I'm going to jump right to the last 4 pages.
Yeah, do it. Go for it.
And talk about how the art style flips and changes. So we've got this story of this guy who is he's hiding his identity. The fact that he is Superman, and he's trying to keep that a secret, and he's had trouble doing that at points because the government have gotten wind of his activities and things like that. But by the end of the story, he's quite calm, and it's like it's a good way to end it actually, the way that they bring it all together and the way that they bring everything. It's like a celebration of everything that is Superman. These last couple of pages, because what happens is like on each page or like through a couple of panels, the art style changes, and there's like several different art styles. You get a little bit of Golden Age Superman art style, you get a little bit of Silver Age, you get the current art style of the book, and you get the Bruce Timm art style, which I really like. The Bruce Timm panels, I think they look great. And it's because by this point as well, he's got children and his 2 daughters, and they also have superpowers. And it's just nice to see this celebration of everything that is Superman, and picking key points from other Superman comics and bringing it all together into this nice little soup at the end of the book, which I think ends the book quite nicely and ties it all up. And
this is what I mean about it being a reconstruction. So they've torn Superman apart so many times in the past with like these dark, depressing stories, but this is one where nothing truly bad happens to him and his family. Like everything works out okay. He figures things out. He finds out that his daughters have inherited his powers, but they're dealing with it, and not only that, they're embracing it and using it for good in a way that he's proud of.
Yes,
and it's like it's the best things of what Superman should represent, looking really hopeful to the future that he's set up a world where his daughters will be safe and be of a benefit to society.
Yeah.
And like you said, it goes through these different art styles where it's representing all the best periods of Superman and all the things that he's supposed to represent, like the best parts of humanity. And what is it? What's the Superman motto? Like truth, justice, and the American way. And like you really get that vibe from it at the end of this book, like it upholding the bastion of humanity. And it's really good. Like I love the note that this story ends on, like him looking at a sunset and then saying, well, the sun sets, but if you look a little bit to the east, sooner or later there'll be a sunrise again. And I've just not read a comic book that's this hopeful in such a long time, and such a breath of fresh air.
Truth, justice in the American way, and you're right, the Americana embodied within this book, and the way that it the way that it takes you through each stage of his life, and it's just so wholesome, the way that he does things and the way that he goes about things. It's not like he's a good person and good things happen to him. And
the thing is, he's a good thing, and good and bad things happen to him.
Yeah.
But it's also like even the worst parts of humanity that affect him. So there's a couple of things we haven't brought up about how he gets chased by the government and captured and potentially experimented on, but he breaks out and discovers that the government has been doing some really messed up experiments on other potential superhumans.
Yes.
So he becomes even more insular. He becomes a lot more protective of himself and his family and his loved ones. You know, for example, his girlfriend, who he then marries, and they start a family together. It's one of those things that's really on his mind because he becomes a lot more untrustworthy of the government and the public and the people around him. And then it starts to pull away from that and how people can change and how what's the word I'm trying to say? Like how progressive the world becomes because he feeds back truth and love and honesty and goodness back into them. He doesn't let it fester in him and become he doesn't become an aggressor himself because of the way the world treats him.
Yeah. He tries to be diplomatic about it because he's got these powers and in the blink of an eye he could end everything if he wanted to, I guess, because we all know how powerful Superman is. But he tries to strikes a deal with them, and he's he tries to be diplomatic about it, which I quite like. That he's not totally on board with working for them, but he's not against it either. Like there are points where he has problems with the activities that they have him doing. Is like, they're only doing this because it's an election or something like that, and they're doing it to score points.
But he also realizes that it takes compromise.
Exactly.
Like the compromise is required from him because they're fearful of him.
Yes, and they're scared of him, and he's scared of them, and they have to come to an agreement. He says
that I could be an enemy, but only if you make me one.
Yes. Yeah. And you're going to make me one if you keep hunting me down and trying to experiment on me. And the lengths that he goes to as well to hide himself from the government, like boring through a tree and then going through the tree and coming out into the ocean. I like all that stuff.
Which he even says in the story is a callback to a Superman story that he's read in his reality.
Yes, yeah. I like
it's kind of cool. I love that idea of because even when I was first thinking when I read the start of the book, I was like, how's he gonna like what potential ways could he find of like getting to emergencies without them finding out where he actually lives? Tracking it back, and it's like there's a hollowed out tree that he dives into, changes clothes, and then emerges in the ocean. It's awesome.
Comes out underwater, and he the other stuff that he does as well, where he leads the Jets on a wild goose chase and comes from a strange direction and then like goes off the grid somewhere miles away to try and like throw him off the scent. Just to mess with. He starts doing things just to mess with them, doesn't he? And there's a great section in the story, actually, another part that I really liked, where he's messing with the government. He wants to send them a message, basically, because they won't leave him alone. So he's like, right, that's it. This is where he decides he's going to try and make an agreement with him. He's like, look, I'm just going to come out and I'm just going to make an agreement with him. And he goes when they're having like a meeting of some description, and he swaps out all the files for Superman comics. And he changes the broadcast when they're doing like a political broadcast. He changes the broadcast for Superman cartoons.
I do wonder how he did that. There's a little, like, again, very, very little nitpicks in this story, but like how he gets the broadcast to change. Like he's just a guy with laser eyes. He's not a tech wizard or anything. He's an author who can fly. How does he get away with doing that?
Maybe he like altered the direction of a certain satellite, or I don't know.
I'm not asking you to justify it. I'm just pointing it out.
It felt like you were putting me on the spot. It's like, go on, Greg, genius, justify it. Tell me how he does it, huh?
No. I'm just pointing out like there's some little inconsistencies that still take it a little bit away from realism, but like again, I'm super nitpicking there.
I'll put my mask on and give you the truth behind the magic. I'll do like a whole. I love that. I love how, and it's like the whole point is when he says to them, he's like, look, I could, if I could do that and I'm just messing around, think what I could have done if I wanted to be nasty. You know, but I didn't do anything nasty. I just did silly things, which is quite. But I quite liked that. I did. I liked that bit. That was my favourite bits. And one of my other favourite bits is where he tells because like Superman, like Clark Kent in the Superman comics, he meets a girl called Lois.
He's constantly being set up with like Lois's and Lana's by his friends who think it's a joke, but he, like you said before, he finds it really tiresome.
Yeah,
and he ends up on what turns out to be a blind date with a girl called Lois Chaudhary. So an Indian girl, which I like doesn't really add up to much, but I thought it was quite a nice touch. Yeah, and they actually really hit it off, and they end up in a long-term relationship and get married and have kids together. But yeah, just the fact that his friends keep trying to set him up with what was it? Lois's, Lana's, and some other character.
They keep setting her up with Clark's as well.
That as well, yeah, because she's had it her entire life.
Yeah, because she's called Lois, and
initially they resist each other, but then they quite quickly fall in love.
It's funny how he tries so hard to resist being Clark Kent.
Yeah,
but
he tries really hard to distance himself.
He tries really hard to distance himself from the Superman name and the Superman continuity, but he ends up doing exactly what Clark Kent does.
Well, I like the touch that when he's naming his twin daughters, he makes a comment about how he'll never name them any of the stereotypical Superman names, and he doesn't. To his credit, like he makes sure that they have relatively normal names, not related to the DC universe. But that doesn't stop them from naming their kids. What's the three names that we get for his grandkids? But essentially,
I'm going back to the book now, and I'm going to find it. But yeah, they give his grandkids end up with Superman names. Where is it? Just going back through the book now, looking for it. Yeah, it's the fact that he tries so hard to distance himself, but he ends up working as a reporter in a big city.
Yeah,
and moving away from the countryside. But I thought that was quite funny actually. And he ends up as an author writing books. Where does it say?
It's neither here nor there. It's. I just like the fact that it doesn't stop his kids from naming their own kids.
Yeah, they still enjoy the joke.
Because they completely embrace what they are in a way that he resisted because he was on his own when he discovered his powers, but they had each other and they knew about their father having these powers as well, but they don't talk about it as a family. He doesn't want to reveal to them that he has these powers because he's not sure if they do. And there's this kind of like cat and mouse game with them growing up until he goes to save a village from a tornado, which dissipates in front of his eyes, and he can hear two children laughing from inside it. And it turns out to be his
daughters,
teenage daughters, who've inherited his powers, and that's how they reveal to each other that.
At that point, they're young women. They're in their 20s.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack in this story. Like, there's a lot of things that weave into each other because there's so much that we haven't got over, like how he. The love story between him and Lois and how they end up together.
That's
and
it.
Kind of like him having a bit of fear for her. Yeah. Because like all of the other superhero stories, he's afraid that if he's with somebody he loves, there'll be a target for any villains that he has, but he doesn't actually have any villains in this story. No. Well, certainly not any supernatural villains. He has the government.
The only thing he has to contend with are the people that are actually his allies, the people that he's working for. They're the only people he fears, because nobody else. There's no one on his level till the end of the book. No other superheroes, but they start to mention other superheroes, like they bring up speedsters, which are like the guys from The Flash, and superhuman. By the time he's an old man, superhumans are becoming the norm. They're all starting to come out of the woodwork, and they're all starting to become sort of normalized in society, and he doesn't have to fear anymore because there are others like him. And I've got the names of the kids now. It's really on the nose, but it's Clark and Jimmy, so as in Clark Kent and Jimmy Olsen.
Right, I see.
Yeah. So yeah, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, like in the old Superman comics. It's quite cool. But yeah, it's he spends his whole life trying to distance himself from it, but then I guess sometimes he starts to lean into it a little bit as well, because the costume that he chooses for himself,
it's exactly Superman's costume.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Anything else you wanted to mention in spoilers, Ray?
Well, yeah. Okay, so this is what I mentioned earlier about it being a really generous story. Like, there's a lot to get from it, I think. So on the first read, I got everything we've just discussed. It's a story about this guy who turns out to have Superman's powers and how it affects his daily life, and how he's not all that like, I think one of the things that it tries to express at the end is how he's not all that different from the rest of us. Everybody has a secret identity that they, hide from themselves and from their family, and it's finding the best in you that you can be. But then I remember when I first finished this book and I asked you and Leon, like, what's the context of this story? Is there something in the DC universe that this was in reaction to? And you said, no, there wasn't. But Leon pointed out that actually it's less of an in-universe context and more of a meta context, in that this was written fairly recently after 9/11. And it's almost in reaction to those events. And with that in mind, I got a pretty different reading of it the second time round, and I read it as basically an immigrant story. And I think the first time I heard this point brought up, so Superman being the ultimate immigrant, I think it was Jeff Kanata in the Slashfilm, maybe the DLC podcast. But he talks about how Superman is in essence the ultimate immigrant. He's not just from another country; he's from another world.
Yes,
and he comes to our planet. He comes to America to embody the best that humanity can be. And I thought that was a really interesting concept. I'd never really seen it through that lens until that was pointed out to me. So in this one, it's not quite the same. He's not an immigrant. He's not an alien in the sense of being out of the planet, but he's an outsider in as an allegory for an immigrant to a new country. So it's like right from the very start, he's been given this name that separates him from the rest, or isolates him and expresses him as being something slightly different. So he inherits this burden from his parents, which also turns out to be the source of his powers, because I think at some point he mentions that he doesn't really quite know where his powers came from, but maybe he willed them into existence, and it wasn't quite coincidence. Maybe there were experiments being done on the population. He just happened to awaken his powers. But yeah, throughout his school life, he's only identified by his name. That's all people can ever see in him. That's how he, that's how everybody interacts with him. Even then, like, he gets bullied a lot because of his name being called Clark Kent, but actually being quite a dweeby kid, like every other kid is. He's not anything physically different or physically special or mentally special or anything. And even the nice kids, like the other geeks who have a love for these superhero comics that exist in their world, they still kind of treat him a bit differently because he's got this name. Yeah, they're not picking on him so much as they are just unable to see past it. Yeah, and still identifying him as an outsider because of the name that he's been given. Yeah. And without any of the respect that maybe that should entail, I guess. It's almost sorry, I was going to say, it's almost a callback to stereotyping, because they assume that from his name he must enjoy comics. Yeah, and his entire family do that as well. They've just assumed his entire life that he'd be cool with it. And he, to his credit, he hides it really well. Like, he doesn't make a big thing of it. He doesn't shout about it or whatever. He graciously accepts these gifts and then just hides them in a cupboard and moves on with his life. And then he discovers that he has these powers, and he doesn't tell anyone. He doesn't tell his parents. I think he tries to find out if he was maybe adopted or if they knew that he was going to have these powers, but they clearly don't know anything about it. They're not aware of it. And I think they see his questioning about him maybe being adopted as just, feeling a bit of an outsider. And his dad says, well, maybe just, try making some friends, which he dismisses because it's not the answer he's looking for, because he's looking for answers for his powers. But his dad is actually giving him pretty good life advice at that point, which he kind of dismisses because it's not what he wants to hear at that point. So once he's found his powers, he's enjoying them, and then discovers that he has some responsibilities because he needs to, he can save people with these powers. But it starts coming back to him, and he wants to try and maintain his secret identity, but also find out where he came from. So he tries to get the help of a reporter whose name I forget. And it turns out that she claims to be trying to help him. She wants to get the word out and find out where he's come from. But really, she's kind of in it for herself. She's in it to keep this scoop that she's found, because he goes to her to try and get some help to find his identity. And it turns out he ends up being used by her because he thinks that she's respecting his privacy, but really she's just protecting her story. And then through her, she does some pretty nefarious, almost terrorist-like actions where she blows up a carnival and he has to save a bunch of people. And this is one of the things, they kind of gloss over it, but I think a bunch of people die in that event.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem very affected by it. Again, I don't know if that's just...
She gets arrested, I think, doesn't she?
She does, but it doesn't really affect him very much. But I think maybe that's just like a quirk of rushing through the writing more than it meaning anything to the character. Because this is when he's about to reveal who he is to the public at this point, and then at the last minute decides that that's not what he wants.
And that's part of the deal he made with her, that when he revealed himself, she'd get the first interview and stuff. Yeah,
which is why she tries to flush him out by setting off a bomb and forcing him into the public eye.
That, and she's getting pressure from her boss as well.
Yeah. And so then from that point we see him kind of go on forward, and it skips to the next issue where he's an adult and he's trying to make a living, but people still bring up this name that he's inherited, and he can't reveal to anyone that he's got these powers, and they're still ribbing him, but he knows that he's more than that. He actually does have these powers. He just can't tell anyone about it. And then he meets his wife, and he, they get married, and he eventually tells her about him being Superman, and he worries about what he's going to pass on to his kids. So not just in, is he going to pass on his powers, but like, what will he leave as his legacy to his children, as well as worrying about if they're going to grow up with...
And how will he protect them?
How will he protect them, and if they will even have the same powers that he has? There's no way for him to know for sure, because it wasn't apparent to his parents when he was a child that he was going to grow up to have superpowers. They just formed in him at some point in his puberty, I guess. And you can see that he fights for a better future. So there's a point towards the end, he's constantly battling against the government, who keep trying to capture him and force him to do, missions for them. And he has to battle with, I think it's Malloy, the representative of the government that he has to interact with. And they're constantly butting heads, and he's constantly fighting for his own rights, for his own agency in that way. And when he's an adult, like an old man, he talks to his daughters about this, about how they've been recruited by the government, but they say, oh yeah, we got to negotiate our terms. And he says internally, they got to negotiate. I had to fight for this, but then I fought so that they didn't have to fight. My children have they get to negotiate their terms. And that's the kind of legacy that he passes on to his kids, which is it's an immigrant tale. My parents came to this country and fought for the rights that I get to enjoy now. And that kind of hit me, and how his oppressors become more progressive as time goes on, because he's not just being the threat they expect him to be, he's being better than that. He's the one who's being calm and finding the humanity in how to use his powers for the greater good.
They're treating him as if he's a monster, but they're the real monsters.
Yeah, and they have a real fear of him. I think there's a parallel to waterboarding where they've captured him and he's in this water tank, and the only reason they're doing it is because they're afraid of his potential, or they've they're on their back foot immediately. They don't try and discuss with him what he's capable of. They just want to find out without asking, torturing the information out of him, basically. And if he hadn't broken out of it, he would have been dissected like all the rest of them.
And
there's a lot of this going on. And
he keeps coming back. That really affects him in the story, because he keeps coming back to that, the fact that he saw babies there.
Yeah, and it makes him a lot more insular.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, what you were saying about Superman being the ultimate immigrant story, I've heard that mentioned elsewhere, definitely, and it is. I think I've heard it mentioned in other places where people have said it, and I think I've actually seen people have seen it written in articles where people have written whole articles on the subject. And it is, yeah, I can 100% see what you're saying, actually, especially with this story as well. Going back to it and visiting it through that lens, I can see that it is an immigrant story. And
yeah,
right,
I mean, whether it's intentional or not, and I get the feeling it is intentional. Like, it's very smartly written to not be overt, but to be a very direct allegory, I think. Because there's even towards the end, like, when he's discussing it with, or when he's seeing how his children have grown up with the same things, like, he doesn't force it upon them. Like, they initially try to figure out whether the kids have got the same powers, but after a while they realize that the kids don't like it. They don't like being tested in this way. Yeah. So they back off and leave them to it and wait and see whether it
actually happens. Yeah.
And it's kind of like he allows his girls to be who they want to be without the pressure of expecting them to be the same as him, and allows them to discover their own legacy and their own history at their own pace. So he leaves his own memoirs out for them to read if they choose to read it. And I guess they do, because they seem to have an idea that he has the powers he has.
I like that his powers start to dull.
And towards the end, he basically comes to like truly embrace his name.
Yeah.
And makes his own traditions, because there's a nice little scene towards the end where normally every Christmas he goes for a fly on his own because he's Superman. So he just, he wants some time by himself because he's quite a, what's the word I'm looking for? He likes to be by himself.
Quite a solitary
guy, yeah. But at the end of the story, his daughters go off for a fly together, and he gets, for the first time, to stay at home with his wife for Christmas, and like,
make
he's
eggnog.
passed on, and drink shitty eggnog.
Yeah,
and he's basically as somebody who's new to this lifestyle, he's made his own traditions in the way that an immigrant to a new country would, and then passed it on to his children. And it all ties together really nicely.
Yeah.
So impressed by this story,
and the end of it as well. In the future, when we see other superheroes and things like that on television in some of the panels, it's like he was he would have been one of the first immigrants, and then this is now him seeing that his people, more of his people are here now, and it's something that's become accepted. I can't find the words I want to use. But if you understand what I mean.
I think that's spot on.
Yeah. And I like one of the notes actually that I wanted to touch on, to change the subject slightly actually, is that I like that his powers dull towards the end of the book.
Yeah, I like that. That it's a very human thing. Like, even though his strength is still superhuman, it starts to wane, and he needs a bit of help flying from his daughters, and also his grandson, who also turns out to have inherited the powers as well. They all go on a family flight together.
Yeah, and at the start of the book, he flies up into the stratosphere and he's not cold, but then he starts wearing an insulated suit towards the end.
Yeah. I like the scene where he goes, like in the Superman comics, Superman is powered by
the sun,
like Earth's yellow sun. So he tries to get as close to it as he possibly can, and it doesn't actually charge him up anymore, like the comics book.
It's
expected. It just gives him a tan.
It's like his midlife crisis thing. Like some people would, people look for ways to stay young, like buying sports cars and stuff, and he's actually trying stuff from Superman comics, which I thought was quite a stroke of genius, actually.
Great.
Yeah. And one of the other things actually that I can now talk about, because we're into the spoiler section, there's points where he flies up into the stratosphere and stares down at the Earth, and this is why Teenage Greg would have liked it, because Teenage Greg used to sit and get pictures from Hubble Space Telescope and from like NASA and stuff, and I used to spend ages just sat at my computer at night just flicking through pictures of space. I don't know why. Maybe it's something that I used to find calming. I don't know.
Because space is awesome.
Yeah,
that's why.
It's just something I used to do. I used to flick through pictures of space endlessly while listening to music. And when I saw that page of him as a teenager staring down on Earth, I'd be like, oh my god! At his age, I would have given anything to be able to do that. But yeah, so I guess we've come to the end of everything we wanted to talk about, unless you've got any words left in the barrel.
No, I think I've exhausted the word I have available, so I'm done. Yeah.
I'm still pulling the trigger, but it's just clicking now. There's no bullets. So we should just wrap it up there. So that has been Ace Comicals. You can find us on Facebook under Ace Comicals. You can find us on Twitter at Ace Comicals. You can find us on WordPress, which is acecomicals.wordpress.com. you can get in touch with us at acecomicals@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us via the Twitter stream as well. You can get in touch with me at Bato on Twitter. If you want to ask any questions, Twitter, the email address, or you can do that through Facebook. We're all these many channels that you can get to us through. And if you want to ask questions of Ray as well, you can reach Ray through the usual Ace Comicals channels. You can find us on iTunes, and you'll be able to find us on all your favourite podcast apps. We know you can find. We say Pocket Cast because we know that's where you can find us, but I'm pretty sure that there are other podcast apps out there. Whatever you use, you should be able to find us on there and follow us and subscribe. Ray, where can we find you?
Yes, that'll be on Twitter at Monkeh, so that's at MOONKEH. And basically, the hub for all of this is our website, which is www.acecomicals.com.
Yes.
And you'll get a link to the blog, the iTunes link, the Pocket Casts, and if you just want to listen to it in the browser, directly from the website, if you so desire.
Indeed, and there's always going to be some extra little bits that we put with the show as well. So if you visit the website, you might find we include a couple of links things we talk about that are fun. So yeah, that's been Ace Comicals. Thanks for listening, guys. Ace Comicals over and out.